No way, he just said this. With 3 picks in the first round of this year's draft, there's been so much focus on the early picks for the New York Islanders, and as a result, there has not been enough attention on their second round selection, who just had a great quote that's going to spark the rivalry between the New York Islanders and the New York Rangers. We're going to discuss it on this episode of Islanders Digest and really take a deeper look at this pick, because after further reflection and watching this player play at the blue and white scrimmage, I think this might have been the steal of the draft. Really quickly, before we get into it, we noticed that 65% of you who watch these videos have not yet subscribed to the channel. So if you're an Islander fan, you want more Islanders content all summer, be sure to subscribe so you do not miss anything. And let's get right into talking about Daniil Prokhorov. This is a player who, I'm going to be fully honest, I was actually disappointed when the Islanders drafted him at first. I thought it was a solid pick, but if you go back and look at my videos talking about the draft, I said I was more impressed with the Islanders pick in the third round in Luka Romano, who I thought was an absolute steal going at the third round, compared to Daniil Prokhorov in the second round. And after watching Daniil play in the prospect game for the Islanders, I was mistaken. At the time, I wanted Malcolm Spence. He was the player who I thought was the best player available. And of course, Malcolm Spence went to the Rangers. So I was a little frustrated with that pick, although after the first round, I was so happy with Darsh. I wasn't going to complain about Malcolm Spence. And to be fair, I don't think Malcolm Spence has as high, that high of a ceiling, though I do think he is going to be a surefire NHL player to some caliber. He's a player who I thought slipped out of the first round a little bit. But honestly, after watching Prokhorov, I've completely changed my mind. I think he was the best pick at this spot. I honestly think he deserved to have a shot at being picked in the first round. And I think the Islanders got an absolute gem of a player. And what makes it even more exciting is just the quote he had on the draft process and what he thought was going to happen. Prokhorov, when speaking about his experience to Russian media outlets, was talking about how he knew the Islanders were going to pick him, and he had a really good conversation with the Rangers as well as the Islanders. And he said, the Rangers wanted to choose me at 43, but I said they wouldn't succeed because the Islanders would choose me at 42. And this is definitely going to add some, not that it's needed, but some more juice to this rivalry between the Islanders and the Rangers. Some spice I thought was going to get added by Wahlstrom when he made all these comments about the Rangers not picking him. Of course, Wahlstrom did not work at all, but I think Prokhorov is a different player in every metric. I think this is going to be a big player for many years for the New York Islanders, but I think it definitely adds this whole story that it seems like the Rangers also wanted Prokhorov at 43, and because he wasn't available, they went with Malcolm Spence. And we'll see how this pans out over the years. Again, originally, I think I did want Malcolm Spence. I think the biggest reason, honestly, was this is a player who is close to Schaefer, which is also going to tie into this rivalry once Malcolm Spence and Matthew Schaefer make the NHL. They both played together at the Erie Otters. They're friends, so this is why I thought this was going to be the pick for the Islanders first. But after looking at Prokhorov, I've really changed my mind. We're going to talk about this right now. Looking at the stats, and to be fair, with Prokhorov's stats were all I had seen going into the draft. With Spence, I had seen a clip or two of him playing, and the critique with Spence is more that he doesn't really have it every single night. Sometimes he plays really, really strong. Other nights, he's invisible. But it seems like he is on the track to being an NHL player. But with Prokhorov, the thing that stood out when the Islanders drafted him right away was the size. 6'5", already weighing 209 pounds, and he has room, considering his massive frame, to build even more muscle onto his body. But looking at the stats for St. Petersburg Dynamo, this is the Russian MHL, so this is basically the Russian Junior League. It's all players under 20. I wasn't entirely blown away by the stats, and for reference, the stats in the Russian Junior League are not as flashy as Canadian juniors. There is more defense played in those leagues. I think it is a more competitive league. It's almost like the Russian AHL. I think that's the best way to describe the MHL. But putting up 27 points in 43 games for Prokhorov really didn't light up my excitement when the Islanders first picked him. But after seeing him play, I've completely changed my mind on Prokhorov. I think this was a great pick, and this is one that I think a lot of Islander fans are already really excited about. One thing you have to note, even though he did not light it up in this league, he did take a big step on offense from last year to this year. And if you actually take a closer look into what happened this season and how he performed, this is a player who was growing into this frame of being 6'5", and I think by the end of the year, he was a much better player than he was at the start. And I definitely think this is something that the Islanders scouting staff were very observant on. They were clearly very high on this player. Some outlets had him ranked a bit lower than he went, but I think clearly this is a player that made sense at this position, because the player that I saw in highlights in the MHL was not the same player that showed up to Long Island and played in the rookie game a few days ago. And that's definitely something that needs to be mentioned when it comes to Prokhorov. He was there. One big concern when you draft Russian players is you don't know how committed they are to playing in the NHL. Sometimes you draft a player and you don't see them for years. I mean, that was the case with Ilya Sorokin. Prokhorov was there. He got up, put the Islanders jersey on, even missed his brother's wedding so he could get drafted in the NHL by the Islanders, and then he actually went to prospect camp, which is something that is definitely worth noting, because it doesn't always happen when it comes to these Russian players. It clearly shows a big commitment to the Islanders, and then he proceeds to have those quotes talking about how he knew the Islanders were going to draft him, and he was excited to get drafted by the Islanders. And then at the end of the prospect camp, he was cheering, let's go, and then having the fans say Islanders clearly committed to the organization. But what really caught my eye with the prospect camp is not the fact that he showed up, although it was notable. It's how well he played. I think a lot of Islander fans who watched this game were really shocked to see how well he skated for a player of his size, how willing he was to use his physical frame. I'm not trying to put too much emphasis into a 4-on-4 prospect game. Yes, it was very exciting to see all these players really skate. I mean, it was incredible to see Schaefer and his wheels. But I think it was really eye-opening to see how much more physical, how much bigger, and how slick Prokhorov's hands were, especially compared to other Islanders prospects who were supposed to be further along in their development than him. And it really after this draft pick, I was saying this is a player who's going to be potentially a really good fourth liner for the Islanders down the line. After watching that game, I really see more of a skill player. Yes, the physicality is there, and I think that is why Darsh loved this pick, because the floor is there with Prokhorov, where he's going to hit hard, he's going to be a wrecking ball out there. But watching that game, there was so much more skill that I really did not expect from him, and it really excited me. He had a point in the game, really carried the puck all the way down the ice, showing his dangles, and then moved the puck over to Finley. It was a great move, and this is a player that I am so much more excited for than I was when he was first drafted by the Islanders. And I still love players like Luca Romano, but it's clear now that Prokhorov is on another level than Romano. And I'm so excited to see what happens next for Prokhorov and the Islanders. And that's really going to be a question moving forward. He was actually drafted into the CHL import draft, which means Prokhorov is going to have the opportunity to move to North America. Now, you might be noting that he was 42nd overall in this CHL draft. I don't think this was at all related to his skill level. I think this is more of a thing where there's really no telling for sure what Prokhorov is going to do next. I don't think he's really inclined at all that he's going to go to the CHL, which is why his rights were drafted a bit lower. I think if Prokhorov said, hey, I'm coming to play North America, he would have been the first player drafted in this import draft. Just based on what I saw at that prospect scrimmage, I truly believe that that's how impressive he looked. And the thing about Prokhorov is the way he fights to the center. The same way we were talking about with Shabanov, where I like how he doesn't fight around the outside of the ice. Prokhorov, the entire time, he was battling along the boards and then taking that puck to the middle of the ice, the throat of defenders. Exactly what you want to see from a player who is going to translate well. Though it would be nice to see him on North American ice. I do anticipate him playing a season in the KHL, and him playing in the KHL for a season is going to be a great indicator to see how he can play with men in a full season. And based on his size, I think he's going to be an abomination in the CHL. In the KHL. He would be an abomination in the CHL too, but I think he's going to actually tear it up in the KHL. Maybe not put a ton of points on the board, and that partially is because the KHL, being one of the best leagues in the world, also does not tend to play rookies as much as they should. Still, I think Prokhorov is going to put up a decent amount of points in the KHL and really build his all-round game, which is something I'm really excited about. This article is really talking about the potential, and this is from the Hockey News, by the way. It's going to be linked below if you want to check out the full article. There's a lot of talk in this article about him playing in the CHL, but I think it would actually be best for him to at least play a season in the KHL. Likely, it'd probably be best for him to play in the KHL until he's able to come to the AHL if he's not ready in 2 seasons. And I know that's crazy to say, coming from a player who's drafted in the second round, but truly, that is how much Prokhorov impressed me with what I've seen. And it just seems like he's taken a big stride from where he was at the end of the MHL season. Clearly a player who is eager to keep on working on his game. And I'd love to know in the comments what you think of this player, what you think of Prokhorov, this pick the Islanders made in the second round. Looking at him, I'm so much more impressed than I initially was on the draft day. I'll admit, I did not know enough about this player when the Islanders first drafted him, but I am so glad that he's the player they picked, and I'm excited for him to add a little bit of energy to this Islanders-Rangers rivalry, and also hit some Rangers players pretty hard, because we're talking a lot about the skill and the speed that Prokhorov showed, but let's not forget, this is also a 6'6" player who knows how to throw a shoulder around, and that is definitely exciting for the Islanders' future. As always, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. My name is Patrick Nilan. Catch you on the next episode of Islanders Digest. Let's go, Islanders!